All right, I'm a bit of a, I'm an inventor, so I am not part of the industry, but I solve problems and I get invited to a lot of situations which ended up meaning that I've got a long history. In fact, the first time I was really exposed to infrastructure, I just started working on a project for Sandia in the United States, and it was a week after they pulled the Hoover wash gates offline. It was about a week after they did that, which is a follow-up from what happened in 9/11. So, so I got privy to all of these really interesting high security documents, and I'm looking through these high security documents, and the first example of a cyber attack was Australia, and it was the biggest one, and it was Maroochy Shire. Any of you know that what happened in Maroochy Shire? You know what happened there? I've been looking at the newspapers about how that was reported, and this report from when I was at Sandia said that the guy actually shut the exit gates, turned all the pumps on, and all of the sewage went up the pipes back into 8,000 homes. And that wasn't reported in the news, but I'm kind of going. I moved from Australia to the United States, where everything happens. I'm here at Sandia, which is the Department of Energy for the United States, the interface with the private sector, and here I am looking about a Queensland attack. It's the role model for all infrastructure defences, so it was really ridiculous. But since that time, I've been I've been in lots of situations that ended up being really heavy for security. For example, I was there helping them when they turned off a 2400 baud modem system from Montana that could control Hoover Dam infrastructure. I was there when Southern Edison discovered a hacker had been on for 3 weeks, and the only reason they couldn't turn anything on the grid off is because the grid was controlled by this book of old instructions, and no one knew how to, remotely trigger these instructions, and so they worked out how to stop this from happening. But I'm kind of going, like, you've got to understand, I was living in Southern California, and in Southern California everything's flat, so all your water, all your sewage is all being pumped everywhere. If the power goes off for 3 hours, people are running out of water. It's not like here. We're so used to having reserves, and we've all gone camping. We all know what to do if something bad happens. There, it would be so serious. And so here I am sitting in Sandia thinking we are so close to such incredible bad things happening. Since that time, I've been exposed to a lot of fairly heavy situations. Just recently, because my company Haventec is in the same building with Nuix, we actually share the same space. Nuix has got some really heavy security people, ex-Secret Service types, who can give you background information on anything that's happened. And the first thing is Jeff Blaish, who is the ex-ambassador. We were talking about, because he's a board member for Nuix, and we were talking about an attack last October on a DNS server, DNS, DNS in the east coast of the United States, and the significance of 6 terabytes of denial of service attack on that, over a period of about 4 hours, and how if you wanted to really shut down a country, all you need to do is extend just past 4 hours. So the data that, the information that I got back from his connections to all the cybersecurity people, is that around about 4 hours, things start to really go crazy, like the inability to respond to overloads on power grids, the inability to handle flood situations, all of the things that are nightmares for us. But that all comes about just from a situation where our DNS system, which, how many of you don't know what a DNS system is? All right. DNS is how we convert a name like yahoo.com into an IP number that we can route to through the internet. If you attack those domain name servers, then every computer goes dumb that's reliant on them. So in every one of your browsers, there's actually an IP number that says, this is your selected DNS service. Now, if you can't get to that DNS service, suddenly your devices are all dumb. So you imagine all of these internet-connected infrastructure devices shutting down, you know. So my solution to that was to build a DNS blockchain and share it with everybody. So that's I started. They sent me off, Rick, put your propeller hat on and go off and see if you can solve that. So I'm doing things like that. But in my work with Haventec, I'm kind of focused on hardening. I feel like going after hackers is playing whack-a-mole. It's an American expression, but I don't know how many of you know what whack-a-mole is. It's a game where this thing keeps popping up and you have to whack it, and the more that you do in a minute, the higher score you get, or something like that. But, you know, I just look at virus and antivirus and malware and everything, and it's just like the quicker you can respond to them, but there's no end to this barrage. And so I've been focusing on hardening. For example, passwords were invented 3 months before I was born, in March of 1962. February 1962. Now, you've got to be joking that we're here for 55 years and no one's thought of a better system than to grab in plain text some kind of secret that's compared to a secret on a server. You've got to be joking that we're still doing that. So, you know, I actually looked at TLS and bastardized TLS to come up with a system where a pin is turned into a code and the code is rotated every time you connect with the server. That's how Haventec works. And in typical fashion, instead of you know, picking something easy like working with Fairfax to protect, you know, subscribers, you know, my business partner, Dr. Castagna, he says, oh, we've got to go to the banks first. If you get the banks, you'll get everybody else, but they're the hardest nut to crack. But, you know, and I'm going, oh, we've got to get this, we've got to get rid of passwords, we've really got to get it off the network. Then I get to Macquarie Bank and get some insight on what's happening in Macquarie and CBA. I've got contacts at CBA and Westpac. And first thing I did was start to scalp the best engineers I could find. And next thing you know, I'm getting some insight on what we're dealing with, because our job is, if you can get passwords off the internet, off the enterprise servers, then you're taking a major vector space of attack away from, you know, from hackers to be able to go after. And you think, oh, that should be a no-brainer. So you go to the C-suite, the CEOs, you know, all of the C guys, and you start saying, this is really great, we're going to limit your exposure. Imagine if you can't hack what isn't there, so wouldn't it be great to get passwords off your network? And they say, great, go and see our CISO. And the CISO says to me, well, when you're as big as Tivoli, you know, TAMS, come back to me. You know, so we're kind of going in a circle, we're trying to solve a problem, but if you're not a big guy, you have to go to the end of the line and work your way through, right? But what I learned there was, I'm sitting there and I'm asking the guys, I'm going, so how easy is it to attack a password on an enterprise network? And I'm new to this space, I'm not an industry expert, but I was totally flummoxed when I found out that between my computer and CBA is protected by TLS, right? Public key encryption. Then a really good symmetric key system underneath that. But between the firewall and the internal TAMS, which handles your password, it's in the clear. So anybody with a sniffer, with the USBs and a sniffer program, can actually sit there and start pulling passwords and usernames off the network. And I can't believe this, and so I started asking guys from, that we'd employed from Macquarie and from CBA, and I'm starting to ask them, is this true? And then we came up with this USB stick and a white sheet of paper with all the instructions, and I started getting ready to go to tell Nicholas Moore, who's the CEO of Macquarie, about this terrible situation, and everybody's having conniptions because Rick's going rogue, trying to make wars with the CISO. But I just can't believe our biggest institutions have your passwords going around in the open. So, I started really thinking about how to protect, not only this area, but also hardening applications and operating systems. And I've actually come up with some harebrained schemes that turns out I'm pretty lucky with. In fact, I'm just in the final stages of working with David Hook, who is the gentleman who does the cryptography for Android. He's an Australian guy. So when you see Android, David's work is on every Android device. And David told me yesterday that this new concept of mine is, it looks as if it looks okay. And I don't know whether that means anything, but in his mind, he thinks it's going to work. So basically what I'm doing there is I worked out how to modify the kernel so that it will only execute applications in directories that are read-only and will not execute executables that are in the data space, and data space is only used to serve the application. So it's an interesting process. I'll be rolling a company out to make sure that it works, but I actually designed that system for Tesla. So the idea is to protect cars. That's what we're talking about here. But the whole idea of hardening things at the moment, I think everything's about putting more band-aids on the problem and selling band-aids when you need to toughen up the skin so it doesn't scratch as much, and you need to make sure that whatever's causing the skin, you get rid of that. You get more a fundamental view of solving the problem. So I'm in the hardening business. But anyway, so I hope that was informative. Thanks very much.
We are a little bit up against the clock, but maybe if with willing participants we can just keep going. If people feel the need to leave because we did set an 11 o'clock finish, feel free to go. Otherwise, you gentlemen okay to stick around for a quick question. I was reminded in both your talks about passwords and security and the simple things. My favourite story is a pizza joint I go to, or used to go to a fair bit, came up with a new software system for their ordering online, and I rang them and I ordered it, and the pizza delivery guy, who was just an independent contractor, I don't think it was Uber Eats or anything, but it was that sort of thing, gave me the receipt, and there on the receipt was my Visa card number, my expiry date and my CVV code all typed out neatly, which I thought was terrific. So it sort of neatly underscores the point that maybe the password and those sorts of concepts are a little bit dead. Questions? One here, and we had some that I promised to come back to. So
I just have a question. I hate passwords. I'm sure most people do. And given we're still using a regime that was perhaps invented 55 years ago, how long do you think it'll be before they're eradicated from our daily lives? Will it be in our lifetimes?
Well, can I answer that? Is that right? The way Haventec works at the moment, it's with PIN. So because you're basically doing a combination factor rather than multi-factor, which is a pain in the neck for everybody, to have two different factors happening all the time, to do multiple factors in the one transaction. So it's actually using a PIN, and it's resistant to if somebody uses your PIN with an account somewhere else, because it's a combination of that and a rolling key that actually gets combined to go to the server, and the server expects to know what code combination is going to come next, so you actually deposit the next key code to be used next time for the next transaction. So that way there's nothing sensitive stored on the server, and you can't reverse engineer the PIN from what's stored on the server. But it is a big ask, because passwords are at the core of all enterprise. If you can get an admin password, you don't need a lot of botnet attacking. You can just do whatever you like.
So it's a bit of a longer journey. I would just echo what Rick said. So you've got legacy systems that are built to handle passwords only. The industry has moved into two-factor and multi-factor and all of these sorts of things to try to reduce the need for passwords, or at least where they're at risk because they've been compromised or they're exposed. You've got something else to take that next level and make it harder. What we're seeing though is in this space we haven't actually come up with a decent solution to replace passwords. I think it'll happen in our lifetime, but it's going to be a very tough journey. The sorts of things that are being discussed at the moment, in addition to Haventec's techniques, are using, and they're case driven. So if you're looking to authenticate to your bank, at the moment you've got tokens and you've got your password, or in some cases it's just a password. But depending on what you're trying to do, it's a higher risk, so they introduce the token. What we're going to see is things like kinetic energy, and using the fact that we're going to have so many other devices on us, probably implanted on us in some sort of future, where that's going to be a signature of you, or of some sort of identity of you, or of something. So a combination of things we're actually starting to see as a replacement. It isn't fully scaled yet as an alternative, but we're seeing things like leveraging Fitbits and other sensors, and what they do is use your kinetic energy, the way you walk, the gait, all of those things to form a signature of you, and under certain things, depending on risk, they might use it to authenticate your bank, or they might actually just use it so you can use Evernote and all these other sort of things. So there are active discussions, but none of them yet have been determined to be robust.
So our natural biometrics have sort of fallen short of that.
See, like iOS uses a thumbprint as a surrogate for a password. So it's storing the password and sending it through. You've got this false sense that you think you're actually protected by thumbprints. But because of rain, moisture, if you've run all of these things, that even thumbprint with us using iPhones every day, you still have that unreliability. So you have to have the fallback, and the fallback has not progressed past being the password, you know.
And there's also privacy. So when initially biometrics, and particularly iris scanning, came on, people hadn't thought of the fact that now you've got biometric prints, and what does that mean? They were also looking at DNA, all of these things. So there's a technology part to the problem, but there's also a policy and ethical one, and those things haven't necessarily been progressed at the same level. So I don't think we have a solution yet, but it will be in our lifetime. And it'll probably be a wallet, actually. I don't think it'll be one thing replacing passwords. It'll be a combination of factors, and you decide what you want to use.
Yeah, I would like to add a few things here. That question is old, and the research on how to replace passwords goes back decades. When such a thing happens, there's an old saying in academia: if you find no one has written about this before, thank you. If you find no one else has written about it before, it's probably because it didn't work, not because someone else didn't think of it. They tried, they failed, it couldn't get published. And I'm skeptical how fast it will be in our lifetime. I'll buy that. That's okay. I could tell you what's not going to work. I don't believe in biometrics. One thing that people tend to forget, except for privacy, is it's irreversible. You're not going to change your face after someone has used a copy of your face to get into the account. What's your next step? Maybe your hand? Not a problem. Fingerprints? I don't believe in them either, and Google doesn't either. And that should give you a good indication. Google is excellent when it comes to security, and Android security warns you explicitly about using your fingerprint to log into your device. There was a nice story a few years back ago at the Chaos Computer Congress in Germany, where the federal minister hyped biometrics, mostly because it hadn't been briefed well. And he hyped biometrics. And what these guys did was take out the glass from which he had been drinking, and then they used a long little piece of tape and got his fingerprint from off the glass and published it. And then they said, it's your turn. Show us now how you're going to defend against this. Okay, so there are a few things that we know that it won't work. Smart cards don't work. Any token you need to carry with you all the time is not going to work. Nice idea about implanting it.
Over the future, unfortunately.
Could be interesting there. I'm not sure what you do